The mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights of our family's executive boardroom, its polished surface reflecting the faces of 10 board members who sat in uncomfortable silence. My sister's voice cut through the tension like a blade, cold and precise, as she delivered the words I had somehow always known were coming. Your employment with this organization has been terminated, effective immediately. You have 24 hours to vacate your office and return all company property. I let my gaze sweep across the room, taking in every detail of this moment that would define the next chapter of my life. The board members, distinguished executives in tailored suits, shifted awkwardly in their leather chairs. Some avoided eye contact entirely, suddenly finding the documents before them fascinating. Others raised their eyebrows in surprise, clearly not having been briefed on this particular agenda item. And there, at the head of the table, sat my sister with an expression of barely concealed triumph. This was the moment she had been orchestrating for years, maneuvering and politicking, waiting for the perfect opportunity to eliminate her competition. The satisfaction radiating from her was almost tangible, filling the room with an energy that made the air feel thick and suffocating. I took a slow, deliberate breath, willing my voice to remain steady despite the anger that bubbled and churned beneath my professional exterior. Is there anything else that requires my attention before I leave? My sister's lips curved into the thinnest suggestion of a smile as she turned her attention to the tablet in front of her, already dismissing me as though I were a minor inconvenience rather than the person who had built the foundation of everything we had accomplished. No, that will be all. You're dismissed. The finality of those words hung in the air as I gathered my leather notebook and expensive pen, gifts from clients who had appreciated my work over the years. I nodded politely to each board member in turn, maintaining the dignity and professionalism that had defined my career. Then I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor with a rhythm that seemed to echo through the silent room. The heavy door closed behind me with a soft click that belied the magnitude of what had just transpired. That quiet sound marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, though none of them in that room understood what was about to unfold. I had been fired from our family's business empire, a third-generation logistics and supply chain company that I had personally transformed from a struggling regional operation into a national powerhouse with revenues exceeding $50 million annually. My name had been synonymous with success in our industry for over a decade, yet here I was, escorted out like a minor functionary. At 43 years old, I had just lost my position as Executive Vice President of Operations at the company my grandfather had founded with nothing but a single truck and an unshakable work ethic back in the 1960s. He had built something from nothing, and I had taken his legacy and amplified it beyond anything he could have imagined. But apparently that wasn't enough. For more than 10 years, I had been the driving force behind our expansion and success. I was the one who spent late nights reviewing contracts, who traveled across the Southeast building relationships with shipping companies, warehousing facilities, and corporate clients. I was the strategist who structured the deals that brought in 70% of our major accounts and generated the majority of our annual revenue. While my sister focused on maintaining our corporate image, attending charity galas, speaking at industry conferences, and cultivating relationships with board members, I had been the engine that powered everything. I was the one in the conference rooms negotiating terms, the one solving logistical nightmares at 3 a.m, the one who understood every detail of how our business actually functioned. Our family business was headquartered in a gleaming office building in the heart of Tennessee's commercial district, a testament to the growth we had achieved. As I walked down the corridor toward my corner office, I passed walls decorated with awards and photographs documenting our company's evolution. Many of those achievements had been my doing, though you wouldn't know it from the plaques bearing my sister's name. My office was a corner suite that I had earned through years of dedication and results. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, and the space was furnished with carefully selected pieces that reflected both professionalism and personal taste. It had been my sanctuary, my war room, the place where I had planned strategies that revolutionized our industry position. My assistant, a sharp young woman who had been with me for 5 years, looked up from her computer as I approached. Her expression immediately registered concern when she saw whatever was written across my face. Despite my best efforts to maintain composure, something must have shown through. "What happened in that meeting?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. I closed the door behind me before answering, knowing that in the next few hours the entire office would be buzzing with rumors and speculation. "I've been terminated. Effective immediately. I have until tomorrow to clear out my belongings and leave." Her mouth fell open in genuine shock, and she set down the pen she had been holding. "That's impossible. She can't just fire you. Without you, this entire organization would collapse within a quarter. You're responsible for practically everything that generates revenue around here." I moved to my desk and sank into the leather chair that had supported me through countless long days and difficult decisions. She can do exactly that, and she just did. Our father appointed her as Chief Executive Officer 6 months ago, and the board unanimously approved the decision. It's her company to run now, at least on paper. But why would she do this? Your track record speaks for itself. You've brought in over 70% of our major client relationships. You've negotiated contracts that increased our profit margins by double digits year after year. Everyone in the industry knows that you're the real talent behind this organization's success. I allowed myself a faint smile, though there was no humor in it. And that's precisely the problem. I've outshined her consistently for years, and she simply couldn't tolerate it anymore. This isn't about business performance or company welfare. This is personal, and it has been building toward this moment for a very long time. As the initial shock began to fade, replaced by a strange sense of calm determination, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a leather portfolio that I had maintained meticulously for exactly this scenario, a possibility I had been preparing for since the day I recognized the political dynamics at play in our family business. The portfolio contained documents I had assembled over the past 5 years. Contracts, agreements, corporate filings, and legal paperwork that represented far more than simple administrative records. They were the foundation of a strategy one had been constructing carefully and quietly, a contingency plan that I hoped would never be necessary but was now about to become my lifeline. "Do you remember that restructuring initiative I implemented 5 years ago?" I asked, looking up at my assistant. "The one where I created my independent consulting entity." Her eyes widened as realization began to dawn. "Your personal firm. The one that technically holds all the major client contracts as the primary service provider." I nodded slowly, allowing myself the first genuine smile since walking into that disastrous board meeting. "I think it's time to remind my sister exactly who controls the relationships that keep this business running. She wanted to be Chief Executive Officer. She's going to learn very quickly what that title actually means when you don't have substance backing it up." I had seen this coming years ago, though I hadn't wanted to believe it would actually happen. Our father, a traditional businessman who valued appearance and social connections over raw talent, had always favored my sister despite her mediocre business acumen and limited understanding of our industry's complexities. She had what he considered the right attributes: the polished image, the social grace, the ability to charm board members and donors at fundraising events. Most importantly, she had never challenged his authority or questioned his decisions, no matter how short-sighted or detrimental they might be to our long-term success. I, on the other hand, had always been the one with ideas. Too many ideas, according to our father. Ideas about operational efficiency, strategic expansion, technological integration, and market positioning that challenged the status quo and pushed against his comfort zone. "You're creating waves," he would say whenever I proposed a new direction or suggested improvements to our established processes. "Let's stick with what works. Don't fix what isn't broken." But what worked, in his view, was maintaining tradition and avoiding risk, even when those approaches were causing us to lose ground to more innovative competitors. What worked was letting my sister take credit for the innovations I implemented, allowing her to be the face of our company's transformation while I labored behind the scenes. While I built deep, meaningful relationships with shipping companies, warehousing facilities, and corporate clients throughout the Southeast, my sister was the polished representative at industry events. While I negotiated complex terms that grew our profit margins by double digits annually, she gave presentations to the board using my data and my strategies, framing them as her own vision. The differences between us extended far beyond our professional capabilities. Growing up, she had been the beauty queen, the social butterfly who seemed to glide effortlessly through life. She was homecoming royalty, sorority president, and the daughter who made our parents proud at country club functions. I was the pragmatic one, more interested in solving complex logistical problems than attending parties or cultivating the right social connections. I read industry publications instead of fashion magazines. I spent weekends visiting warehouse facilities instead of shopping with friends. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" our mother would ask, not unkindly but with genuine puzzlement. "She makes social connections so easily. She knows how to work a room. Those skills matter in business, you know." What they never understood, or perhaps chose not to see, was that I made connections too, just different kinds. Instead of cocktail parties and charity galas, I built relationships in conference rooms and on warehouse floors. Instead of social climbing and image cultivation, I focused on creating genuine value and delivering results that spoke for themselves. And over time, clients came to trust me personally, not just our company brand or my sister's polished presentations. They wanted to work with me specifically because I understood their challenges, anticipated their needs, and consistently delivered solutions that exceeded expectations. 5 years ago, when whispers of succession planning began circulating through our organization, I made my strategic move. With the help of a trusted attorney who specialized in corporate structures, I created my own independent consulting company, a limited liability corporation with exactly one client, our family business. On paper, the structure appeared to be nothing more than a tax efficiency measure, a way to optimize our business operations and provide some flexibility in how we contracted with clients. In reality, it was my insurance policy, a safety net that I hoped would never be necessary but was prepared to deploy if family politics ever threatened my livelihood. "This structure gives us operational flexibility," I explained to our father when I proposed the arrangement. "It allows me to negotiate directly with clients without having to navigate all the corporate bureaucracy and approval processes. We can be more responsive, more agile in a competitive market." He approved the concept without truly understanding its implications or examining the details of what I was proposing. Why would he question anything that appeared to improve our bottom line and make operations more efficient? To him, it was simply another one of my practical little fixes, another example of my talent for optimizing processes. He certainly didn't recognize it as the foundation of my independence and future security. Over the following 5 years, I systematically and methodically migrated all major client relationships to my personal consulting firm. The paperwork was transparent and available for anyone to review if they bothered to look carefully. Every contract was properly filed, every agreement was legally sound, every transition was documented. But my sister was too busy planning her eventual ascension to the CEO position and renovating what would become her executive office to notice the fine print in those contracts. She never bothered to examine the fact that the agreements listed my consulting firm as the primary service provider, with our family company serving merely as the fulfillment partner handling the operational logistics. The distinction seemed minor and technical, but it was actually fundamental. Clients were contracting with me and my expertise specifically, not with our family company's brand or reputation. Our family business was essentially subcontracting the actual service delivery, but the relationships, the trust, and the legal obligations all resided with my personal entity. Our father's retirement announcement last month had accelerated everything and brought the succession drama to its inevitable climax. The carefully crafted succession plan was unveiled at a special board meeting that I remembered with crystalline clarity. My sister would assume the position of Chief Executive Officer, taking control of the company's strategic direction and representing our brand to the world. I would remain in my operational role, essentially continuing to do all the actual work while she wore the title and received the recognition. The board members nodded their approval, satisfied that tradition had been maintained and family harmony preserved. Or so they thought. What they failed to understand was that the power in our business didn't reside in the title or the corner office or the name on the executive floor directory. The power resided in the relationships, the trust, and the contractual agreements that generated revenue. And those elements were mine, carefully secured through years of strategic planning. The morning following my termination, I arrived at the office well before dawn, deliberately choosing a time when the building would be empty and quiet. There was no need for an audience as I packed up 15 years of my professional life. No reason to subject myself to the uncomfortable sympathy or gossip of colleagues. The building's lobby was silent except for the hum of the climate control system and the distant sound of a cleaning crew working on the upper floors. I rode the elevator to the executive level, my security badge still functional for a few more hours, and made my way to my office for the final time. As I began boxing up family photographs, industry awards, personal books, and the various items that had made this space mine, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed the name of one of our most important clients, the logistics director for a major distribution company that represented nearly 15% of our annual revenue. "Good morning," I answered, keeping my voice professionally neutral despite the early hour. "This is an unexpected but pleasant surprise." "I need to understand what's happening," she said, her tone conveying both confusion and concern. "I just received an email from your sister introducing herself as my new primary point of contact. The message implied that you were no longer involved with our account. What's going on?" I smiled to myself as I carefully wrapped a glass award in bubble wrap. "Good morning to you as well. Yes, there have been some significant organizational changes. My sister has assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer of the family company. She's apparently beginning to take a more hands-on approach to client relationships. But our agreement is with you personally," the client responded, her confusion evident in every word. "The contract we signed 3 years ago specifically names your consulting firm as the service provider. Your family's company is listed as the fulfillment partner, but the primary relationship is with you. Does your sister understand the contractual structure?" "I don't believe she's reviewed the contracts in sufficient detail yet," I replied, maintaining a carefully neutral tone that concealed my satisfaction. "She may not fully understand the nuances of our business arrangements. Would you like me to clarify the situation with her on your behalf?" "I would very much appreciate that," she said firmly. "We signed our agreement specifically to work with you and your team. Your expertise, your responsiveness, your understanding of our unique challenges, those are what we're paying for. If that relationship is changing, we need to discuss whether our contract remains valid." After ending the call, I continued the process of packing up my office, though now with a considerably lighter heart and a growing sense of vindication. By the time I had filled 3 cardboard boxes with my belongings, similar calls had come in from 3 additional major clients, all expressing confusion and concern about the communication they had received from my sister. None of them had any intention of transferring their business relationship to her, or accepting her as a substitute for the partnership they had built with me over years of consistent performance. At precisely 8:30 in the morning, right as the office began filling with employees arriving for the workday, my phone illuminated with my sister's name. I let it ring twice before answering, savoring the moment and the knowledge of what this conversation would entail. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, as though this were any ordinary day. "Where are the detailed client files?" Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic, the professional veneer already beginning to crack. And why is our largest client telling me she refuses to work with this company anymore? What did you say to her? I set down the picture frame I had been wrapping and gave her my full attention. The client files are located exactly where they have always been maintained, in the shared network drive, organized alphabetically by account name and client company. As for your conversation with our client, she's simply exercising her contractual rights and clarifying the terms of her agreement. What are you talking about? What contractual rights? We have a standard service agreement with all our clients. They contract with our company, not with individual employees. I could picture her perfectly in my mind, standing in her newly renovated CEO office with its designer furniture and carefully selected artwork, probably wearing one of her immaculate designer suits. Her face flushed with frustration and the dawning realization that something was very wrong. I suggest you carefully review the contract headers and the specific language in our client agreements, I said calmly. All of our major accounts are contracted through my independent consulting firm as the primary service provider. Your family company is designated as the fulfillment partner responsible for operational logistics. The client specifically chose to work with me and my expertise, not with the family brand or company reputation. The silence that followed was profound and extended for so long that I briefly wondered if the call had been disconnected. Then I heard her breathing, rapid and shallow, as she processed the implications of what I had just explained. You can't do this, she finally said, her voice rising an octave and losing all pretense of professional composure. This is sabotage. This is corporate warfare. You're deliberately trying to destroy the company out of spite. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me, though there was no real humor in it. No, actually, I'm not doing anything at all. I already did it 5 years ago to be precise. And I did it with complete transparency. Our father personally approved the consulting firm structure. The board signed off on every single contract. The legal department reviewed and filed all the paperwork. This isn't sabotage. This is simply a business structure that you never bothered to understand. This is a betrayal of our family, she hissed. No, I replied, my voice hardening. You wanted to be chief executive officer. Congratulations on achieving your goal. But the relationships, the trust, the expertise, and the actual revenue-generating contracts, those elements are mine. They always have been. You just never paid enough attention to realize it. Before she could respond, I ended the call and set my phone on the desk, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. This wasn't how I had wanted things to unfold. Given a choice, I would have preferred to continue building the business alongside my sister, leveraging our different strengths toward a common goal. But she had made her choice when she fired me, and now she would have to live with the consequences. As I was taping shut the final cardboard box, my assistant appeared at the office door carrying her own box of personal belongings, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I submitted my resignation to Human Resources about an hour ago, she announced with evident satisfaction. Told them I would be joining your consulting firm effective immediately. I assume you'll be building something new and will need someone who understands how you work. The realization hit me with unexpected force. This wasn't simply about taking satisfaction in my sister's predicament or proving a point about who truly held the power in our business. This was my opportunity to build something genuinely mine, unencumbered by family politics and traditional expectations. For 15 years I had poured my talents, energy, and creativity into a company that would never truly recognize my contributions or reward me appropriately. Now, whether by intention or accident, my sister had given me the push I needed to break free and create something better. I picked up my box and took one last look around the office where I had spent so much of my adult life. The space suddenly seemed smaller and less significant than I had remembered, as though it had already begun fading into the past. Let's go, I said to my assistant. We have a company to build from scratch, and apparently we're starting today. I spent the remainder of that day in my home office, which quickly transformed from a quiet space for occasional weekend work into a command center for a rapidly evolving business crisis, or opportunity, depending on your perspective. My dining room table disappeared under stacks of legal pads, my laptop, file folders, and the remnants of delivered food consumed without really tasting it. By evening, I had made calls to every single major client account, carefully explaining the situation and confirming their intentions. The results confirmed what I already suspected but had hardly dared to hope. All 14 of our top-tier client accounts, the ones generating the vast majority of our revenue, would be following me to my independent consulting firm. They weren't interested in maintaining relationships with my sister or the family company brand. They wanted to work with me specifically. "What about the fulfillment and operational logistics?" asked one client, a procurement director I had worked with for 7 years. "You've got the relationships and the strategic expertise, but can you actually handle all the warehousing, transportation coordination, and supply chain management? Until yesterday, you had your family company's entire infrastructure supporting you." It was a legitimate and concerning question. Until my termination, I had relied completely on our family company's infrastructure. Their network of warehouse facilities, their partnerships with transportation providers, their sophisticated software systems for inventory management and shipment tracking. "I've been anticipating this transition for some time," I assured him, projecting far more confidence than I actually felt in that moment. "I've already secured preliminary partnerships with 3 regional fulfillment centers. Your operations won't experience any disruption or delay. Everything will continue seamlessly." What I didn't tell him was that those partnerships had been finalized only that afternoon through a frantic series of phone calls, hastily arranged video conferences, and preliminary agreements signed electronically without the benefit of my attorney's review. I was quite literally building the airplane while flying it, making commitments based on relationships and reputation rather than established infrastructure. By 9 o'clock that evening, my dining room resembled a war room from a political campaign or military operation. Every surface was covered with documents, notes, contact information, and preliminary plans sketched on legal pads. I had secured the clients and had my assistant committed to joining me. I had a basic framework for operational logistics. What I desperately lacked was a complete team with the expertise to actually deliver on all the promises I had been making. As if the universe was responding to my thoughts, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. Our former operations manager, a talented professional I had personally recruited and mentored for the past 4 years. "Heard what happened today," his message read. "Your sister is completely panicking. Apparently half the operations team is ready to walk out. Are you hiring? Because if you're building something new, I want in." Before I could formulate a response, another text arrived, this one from my sister. The message was brief and imperious. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning at 8. Your presence is required to explain this situation." I actually laughed out loud, the sound echoing through my empty house. Required. She had fired me less than 24 hours ago, terminated my employment with extreme prejudice in front of the entire board. Now I was suddenly indispensable and required to attend meetings. I responded to the operations manager immediately. "Send me names of everyone who's interested. Competitive compensation packages for all. Let's build something better together." To my sister, I sent a deliberately brief reply. "I'll have my attorney attend as my representative." My phone rang immediately, her name appearing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. When it rang again 30 seconds later, I sighed and finally answered. "This isn't a request," she snapped, her voice sharp with anger and barely controlled panic. "The board needs to understand what's happening with our client base. You owe them an explanation for this disaster you've created." "I don't owe anyone anything," I replied evenly, keeping my own emotions carefully controlled. "You fired me. Remember those words. Your services are no longer required." Those were your exact words, delivered in front of the entire board. You made it very clear that I was no longer part of the organization. That was before I fully understood the situation with the contracts and the consulting firm structure. We need to discuss the contracts that have been in place for 5 years, I interrupted. The same contracts that were personally approved by our father and signed by multiple board members. Those contracts, the ones with my consulting firm listed clearly as the primary service provider. I didn't hide anything or deceive anyone. The information was always available. You just never bothered to look carefully enough to understand how our business actually operated. You deliberately structured this to undermine the company, she accused. I took a deep breath, forcing down the anger that threatened to overwhelm my professional composure. No, I created a business structure that protected both the company's interests and my clients' needs. It allowed flexibility and efficiency that benefited everyone. It's not my fault or responsibility that you never took the time to understand the fundamental architecture of how we generated revenue. That failure of attention and understanding is entirely yours. Father will never forgive you for this betrayal, she said, deploying what had always been her most powerful weapon, the threat of parental disappointment. Throughout our lives, our father's approval had been the currency that determined value and worth in our family. She had always possessed it in abundance. I had been constantly working to earn even modest recognition. Perhaps you're right, I acknowledged. But unlike you, I've learned to build my sense of self-worth on achievement and results rather than parental approval. I'll take my chances with professional success over family politics. Good luck with your board meeting tomorrow. After ending the call, I sat in silence for several minutes, allowing the weight of the day to fully settle over me. Had I truly spent 15 years preparing for this exact moment? Not consciously, perhaps, but on some deeper level, I had always known that my sister would eventually find a way to push me aside. The consulting firm structure hadn't been created as a weapon to attack the family business. It had been conceived as a shield to protect the value I had built from the inevitable family politics and favoritism. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from our father. Simple and direct. We need to talk. Call me. I set the phone aside without responding. Whatever he wanted to say could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I needed to focus on the immediate challenge of building a functional company from scratch, while maintaining service to clients who were already expecting seamless continued operations. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. In attempting to sideline me and claim sole credit for our family business's success, my sister had inadvertently given me the push I needed to break free from constraints that had been holding me back for years. For 15 years, I had been pouring my talents, energy, and creativity into building a company that would never truly be mine, supporting a family business where my contributions were minimized and my sister claimed credit for my innovations. Now, thanks to her short-sighted decision to fire me, I had been forced into an opportunity to create something genuinely mine. I opened my laptop and created a new document, typing the first line of a formal business plan. Full-service logistics solutions, building the future of supply chain management. It had a good ring to it. More importantly, it represented possibility and potential unconstrained by family dynamics or traditional expectations. The next morning arrived with a cascade of rapid developments that threatened to overwhelm my ability to process and respond. By 7 o'clock, the operations manager had sent me a detailed list containing the names of 8 employees ready to leave the family company immediately and join my new venture. These weren't just any employees. They were key personnel I had personally recruited, trained, and mentored over the years. They were the specialists who understood our most complex client relationships, the analysts who could optimize supply chain efficiency, the account managers who had built personal connections with purchasing directors across the Southeast. By 7:30, my attorney was en route to the family company's emergency board meeting to represent my interests and protect me from whatever accusations or demands might emerge. And by 8 o'clock, I was sitting in a temporary office space I had somehow managed to secure overnight. A small suite in a business park with barely enough room for a conference table and a few desks, but it was mine. I conducted my first official staff meeting as the CEO of an independent company, addressing the small team gathered around a table that was too small for our numbers. Our situation is unique and challenging, I began, looking around at the faces of people who had taken a significant professional risk by following me. We have secured the clients and we possess the expertise they need. But we're building our operational infrastructure in real time while simultaneously maintaining service delivery. It's not going to be easy. There will be long hours, unexpected challenges, and moments of uncertainty. But we have something our former employer no longer possesses: the authentic relationships that actually matter to clients. My assistant and the operations manager nodded confidently, their faith in our mission evident. The others, mostly analysts and account managers who had followed the operations manager, looked nervous but determined, the kind of cautious optimism that comes with taking a calculated risk on an uncertain future. "What about the warehouse contracts and fulfillment partnerships?" asked one of the logistics specialists, a detail-oriented analyst I had worked with for 3 years. "The family company has exclusive relationships with most of the major facilities in our region. How do we handle fulfillment without access to their distribution network?" "You're absolutely right that they control most of the established facility relationships in our immediate area," I acknowledged, appreciating his attention to a critical operational detail. "Which is exactly why we're not going to fight them on that particular front. I've secured preliminary partnerships with facilities in adjacent markets, different cities that can serve most of our clients' needs. We'll route shipments through those locations until we can establish our own local presence and facility relationships. It's not perfect, but it's functional." The meeting was interrupted by an incoming call from my attorney. I gestured for the team to remain and activated the speaker function so everyone could hear the update. "The board meeting just concluded," she reported, her voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and surprise. "It was contentious and quite dramatic. Your sister attempted to argue that your consulting firm structure represented a breach of fiduciary duty and corporate responsibility. She wanted the board to authorize immediate legal action against you and your new company." My stomach tightened despite my confidence in our legal position. A lawsuit, even a groundless one, would consume time, resources, and energy that I desperately needed to focus on building operations. "And what was the board's response?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral and professional despite the anxiety churning in my gut. "They shut her down rather thoroughly," my attorney said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Apparently, 2 of the long-serving board members had actually read the contracts carefully when they were originally signed and understood exactly what they were approving. They reminded your sister that the consulting firm structure had delivered exceptional results for 5 consecutive years. They pointed out that the arrangement had been completely transparent and properly documented. Several board members expressed frustration that she had fired you without understanding the fundamental business structure. Relief washed over me in a wave so powerful that I had to sit down. "So there won't be a lawsuit?" "No lawsuit," she confirmed. "But they did authorize her to make you a counteroffer. Essentially, the board wants to bring your consulting firm back as a formal, permanent contractor with a multi-year commitment. They're offering to legitimize and formalize the exact arrangement you already had, but with significantly better financial terms." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream at the absurdity. They had fired me with barely 24 hours' notice, publicly humiliated me in front of the board, and now they wanted to hire my company to provide the exact same services I had been delivering before the termination. "They're desperate," I observed. "They just lost 80% of their revenue stream overnight and they're scrambling to recover." "Extremely desperate," my attorney agreed. "The offer is actually quite generous. 7 figures annually with guaranteed minimum payments, substantial performance bonuses, and protection clauses that would prevent them from terminating the arrangement without cause. They're essentially offering you complete autonomy to run operations your way while providing steady income and access to their infrastructure. I looked around at my new team, all watching intently and waiting to understand what this development might mean for their decision to follow me. "Tell them I'll review their proposal carefully," I said. "But make it clear that we're moving forward with building independent client relationships regardless of their offer. We're not putting our future on hold while they try to recover from their mistakes." After ending the call, I turned back to the team. "It appears we have multiple options and paths forward. But let me be absolutely clear about something. I'm not considering any arrangement that doesn't include all of you and doesn't provide you with the professional opportunities and compensation you deserve. You took a risk following me, and I'm going to make sure that loyalty is rewarded." Later that afternoon, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my temporary office. Inside was the formal offer from the board, along with a handwritten note on expensive stationery that I immediately recognized as my father's personal correspondence cards. The note was brief but significant. "You've outplayed us all. I should have made you CEO years ago instead of following tradition and family expectations. Perhaps this is the wake-up call I needed. Can we talk?" I stared at the note for a long time, emotions churning in a complex mixture I couldn't fully untangle. After decades of being overlooked, minimized, and having my contributions attributed to my sister, my father had finally recognized my value and capabilities. But the recognition had only come after I had demonstrated my power to seriously damage, potentially destroy, the company he had spent his life building. There was no satisfaction in this moment, only a profound sadness for all the years wasted, all the potential squandered because of pride, tradition, and an inability to see past gender expectations and birth order. My phone buzzed with a text message from my sister. Unlike her previous imperious demands, this message was simply, "This isn't over. Not even close." Of course it wasn't. My sister had never been one to accept defeat gracefully or to acknowledge when she had been outmaneuvered. The coming weeks and months would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new attempts to undermine what I was building, new strategies to try to reclaim the power she had lost. But for the first time in my professional life, I wasn't worried about her threats or schemes. I had the clients, I had a growing team of talented professionals, and most importantly, I had leverage that came from genuine value creation rather than family politics or inherited position. Before responding to either my father or my sister, I texted the operations manager. "Send me those employee names. Everyone who's interested in joining us. Let's offer competitive packages and start building a real team." To my sister, I simply didn't respond. Silence seemed more powerful than any words I might write. The coming weeks established a brutal new reality that tested every assumption I had made about entrepreneurship and my own capabilities. Building a company from absolute scratch while simultaneously servicing existing clients who expected seamless continuity proved even more challenging than I had anticipated in my most pessimistic projections. We worked 14 to 16-hour days, transforming our cramped temporary office into a command center of organized chaos. Desks were covered with laptops, phones constantly rang with client questions and vendor negotiations, and whiteboards displayed increasingly complex logistics flowcharts that we updated hourly as new challenges emerged. Each morning began with an all-hands meeting at 7 o'clock, where we tackled the day's most pressing operational issues, reviewed client needs, and coordinated our limited resources. Each evening ended well after dark with a review session examining what we had accomplished, what had gone wrong, and what still required immediate attention before we could even think about going home. The pace was completely unsustainable from a work-life balance perspective, but absolutely necessary for survival. We were essentially running a marathon at sprint pace, and everyone on the team understood that if we stumbled or slowed down, we risked losing the clients who had taken a chance on following us. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Most nights I collapsed into bed around midnight, my mind still racing through the next day's challenges, only to wake at 5 in the morning with new ideas or sudden realizations about problems that needed solving. My dining room remained transformed into an auxiliary office space. My kitchen counter served as a staging area for documents that needed review. My home had ceased being a sanctuary and had become simply another extension of the business I was desperately trying to build. 3 weeks into this grueling existence, I finally found time to properly respond to the board's offer. I invited my attorney to review my counterproposal before submitting it, wanting to ensure that my exhaustion and stress weren't causing me to make strategic mistakes. She read through the terms I had drafted, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When she looked up, her assessment was blunt and direct. "This is extremely aggressive," she noted, tapping her pen against the document. "You're asking for double their initial offer plus equity in the family company, specifically 5% ownership. That's enough to have a meaningful voice in major decisions without triggering resentment from the other family shareholders. But Valerie, this feels personal rather than strategic." I set down my coffee cup and met her gaze. "Of course it's personal. They're my family. Everything about this situation is inherently personal." "That's not what I mean," she clarified, leaning forward. "This feels like you're trying to prove something to make a point about your value, rather than making the best possible business decision. The board's initial offer was actually quite generous given the circumstances. By doubling down and demanding significantly more, you risk turning a potential resolution into an ongoing battle." Her observation stung precisely because it contained undeniable truth. Was I pushing too hard simply to demonstrate my power? Was I trying to punish my sister and father for years of being overlooked? The board's initial offer had indeed been generous, and would have provided significant financial security while we continued building independent operations. Doubling down with aggressive demands might be unnecessarily antagonistic, might transform a potential partnership into an adversarial relationship that would benefit no one. "You're right," I conceded after a long moment of reflection. "Revise it to a 20% increase over their initial offer, with the equity request intact at 5%. That represents fair market value for what we bring to the table. Our client relationships, our operational expertise, our proven track record. It's ambitious but justifiable." My attorney nodded with approval, making notes on the document. "Much better. This positions you as a serious business professional, rather than someone driven by family resentment. Now what about your sister? She's been notably quiet since that threatening text message. That silence seems uncharacteristic and potentially concerning." I had been wondering the same thing. My sister's silence over the past 3 weeks was completely uncharacteristic and therefore worrying. She had never been someone who accepted defeat gracefully or who retreated quietly when challenged. Her absence from the battlefield suggested she was planning something, regrouping and strategizing rather than simply accepting the new reality. "I have a meeting scheduled with her tomorrow," I admitted, feeling a complex mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "Just the two of us, away from the company offices and the business environment. She specifically requested it, asked if we could meet somewhere neutral to talk without lawyers or board members present." "Do you want me there?" my attorney asked, her concern evident. I shook my head. Some conversations need to happen without legal representation. This is one of them. Whatever she wants to say, whatever reconciliation or confrontation is coming, it needs to be sister to sister rather than opposing counsel. The following day, I met my sister at a small independent coffee shop located equidistant from both our offices, neutral territory that belonged to neither of our professional worlds. She had arrived first and was already seated at a corner table when I walked in. Her expression carefully neutral and unreadable. "You look exhausted," she observed as I sat down. Her tone neither sympathetic nor mocking, simply stating an objective fact. "Building a company from nothing is exhausting work. I replied, signaling the barista for coffee. You'd know that if you'd ever actually done it instead of inheriting an established organization. It was a cheap shot, an unnecessary jab born from weeks of stress and accumulated resentment. I regretted the words almost before they finished leaving my mouth. But I was too tired for diplomacy, too worn down by constant pressure to maintain careful professional boundaries. To my surprise, my sister didn't take the bait or respond with her own cutting remark. Instead, she simply stirred her coffee slowly, her gaze distant and contemplative. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few weeks, she finally said, her voice quieter than I'd expected. About why you created that consulting firm structure in the first place, about what drove you to build such an elaborate safety net. And I've come to a realization. Please enlighten me, I said, unable to completely suppress my sarcasm. You never trusted us, she continued, meeting my eyes directly. Not me, not father, not the board, not anyone in the family business structure. You always needed your own independent security, your own escape route. That consulting firm wasn't created because of any specific incident or decision. It was created because fundamentally, at the deepest level, you never believed we would treat you fairly. I considered her words carefully, examining whether they were accurate or simply her interpretation designed to shift blame. After a long moment of reflection, I had to acknowledge that she had identified something true and fundamental. Trust has to be earned, I said quietly. Father spent years, decades actually, overlooking my contributions while consistently elevating yours. You spent those same years accepting credit for my work, standing in spotlights that should have been shared, presenting my strategies and innovations as your own vision. What exactly was I supposed to trust? That you would suddenly start acknowledging my value. That father would wake up one morning and recognize that his younger daughter might actually be more capable than his firstborn. We're family, she said, as if that single word explained everything and excused all the accumulated slights and dismissals. Family businesses fail all the time, and they fail precisely because people confuse family loyalty with sound business judgment. I countered, my voice harder than I intended. Father made you CEO because you're his oldest daughter and because you fit his traditional expectations, not because you were objectively the best person for the position. And you accepted that role despite knowing, and you did know, that you didn't have the expertise or the client relationships necessary to succeed. And you created a secret parallel company structure to steal our clients because you're what? Some misunderstood business genius who was never properly appreciated. Her facade was finally beginning to crack, anger and hurt bleeding through her controlled exterior. I created a structure that protected the value I had personally built through years of hard work. I shot back. Value that you and Father were perfectly happy to benefit from right up until the moment you decided I was expendable. I didn't steal anything. Those clients chose to work with me specifically because I delivered results, because I understood their needs, because I built relationships based on competence rather than family name. The words hung between us, sharp and cutting. Years of sisterly competition, resentment, and unspoken tensions had been distilled into this moment of brutal honesty. You want to know the real reason Father made me CEO instead of you? My sister asked, her voice rising slightly. Because you're ruthless. Because you're willing to burn down everything to prove a point. This entire stunt with the contracts, with taking the clients, it proves exactly what he always feared. You'd destroy the family legacy just to demonstrate your superiority. Her accusation hit harder than I wanted to admit. Was that how they truly saw me? As someone who would deliberately destroy our family's multi-generational business out of spite and ego? I didn't burn anything down, I said quietly, fighting to keep my emotions under control. You lit the match when you fired me without understanding the business you were supposedly leading. I'm just making absolutely certain that I don't get consumed in the flames you started. We sat in tense silence for several minutes, the air between us thick with decades of complicated sisterly dynamics. Around us, the coffee shop continued its normal operations. Students studying at tables, freelancers working on laptops, retirees reading newspapers, completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding in the corner. "So what happens now?" my sister finally asked, her voice weary. "Do we just become permanent enemies? Do we spend the rest of our lives competing and undermining each other? Is that really what you want?" That was indeed the critical question. What did I actually want from this situation? Revenge, vindication, reconciliation, success. All of the above in some impossible combination. "I want to build something meaningful," I said slowly, working through my thoughts as I spoke them. "Something that's genuinely mine, that reflects my capabilities and vision without being filtered through family politics or traditional expectations. Whether that happens in partnership with the family company or completely independently, I honestly don't know yet." 3 months after my sister had fired me, I found myself standing in the impressive lobby of a major defense contractor's regional headquarters. Their facility was state-of-the-art, reflecting the seriousness and precision of their industry. This was our newest and potentially largest client, and their contract would push my company's annual revenue past $40 million, nearly double what my small team had managed to generate while working at the family business. "Quite impressive what you've built in such a remarkably short time frame," remarked their procurement director as he led me through the facility, showing me the operations we would be supporting. "Most startups take years to reach the level of operational sophistication you've achieved in just a few months. We had some unique advantages at launch," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "An already established team with years of experience working together, proven expertise in logistics and supply chain management, existing client relationships built on trust. We weren't really starting from zero. We were more like an established operation reorganizing under new management. And without all the family drama from what I hear," he said with a knowing look that made me slightly uncomfortable. "Nashville's business community isn't that large. Word travels fast about significant developments and family conflicts." I maintained a professional smile despite my discomfort at having my personal business become industry gossip. Every company has its evolution story and its growing pains. We're focused on delivering exceptional results regardless of our origin story. "Indeed," he agreed. "Well, we're genuinely excited to work with you directly. Your reputation for hands-on management, for understanding client needs at a granular level, for being accessible and responsive, that's exactly what we need for our supply chain transformation project. We've worked with large, established firms before, and frankly, they couldn't match the attention and expertise you're offering." Later that afternoon, I returned to our new permanent offices feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. We had moved out of the cramped temporary space into a renovated warehouse building. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings with industrial lighting, open workstations that encouraged collaboration, and private meeting rooms that we had named after our first clients as a tribute to the companies that had taken a chance on us. In just 3 months, we had grown from 8 desperate employees working at a folding table to 23 professionals with specialized expertise across logistics, client management, operations, and business development. The operations manager met me at the entrance, barely able to contain his excitement. His expression told me something significant had happened during my absence. "The family company's board accepted our counter-proposal," he announced, practically bouncing on his toes. "We're officially their primary logistics partner for the next 3 years. 7-figure annual contract, guaranteed minimums, performance bonuses, everything we asked for." I felt a complex wave of emotions wash over me. Satisfaction at having my value finally recognized in concrete financial terms, vindication after years of being underestimated, but also an unexpected touch of melancholy about how we had reached this point. "Have they announced it internally at the company yet?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. "Scheduled for tomorrow morning," he confirmed. Your sister is going to have to stand in front of the entire organization and explain that they're now subcontracting their core business functions to her sister's independent firm. From what I'm hearing through my contacts still there, she fought this arrangement until the very end. The board finally gave her an ultimatum: accept the partnership or resign from the CEO position. I sighed, feeling the weight of family complexity settling over my professional success. She won't forgive me for this. Not ever. This is the kind of public humiliation that becomes permanent resentment. Does that matter to you? He asked, and it was a completely fair question given everything that had transpired. The relationship between my sister and me had been fractured and dysfunctional long before this business conflict had brought everything to a crisis point. There had been years of competition, comparison, and accumulated resentments that predated any of these corporate maneuvers. Still, there was a finality to this arrangement, a permanent severing of whatever remained of our sisterly bond, that felt heavier than simple business competition or sibling rivalry. I care, I admitted honestly. But not enough to sacrifice what we're building here. Not enough to go back to being invisible and undervalued. Not enough to pretend that family obligation should override professional capability. The formal public announcement of our partnership with the family company triggered a new phase of explosive growth for my firm. With our former employer now effectively functioning as our largest client, we suddenly had the financial stability and industry credibility to pursue aggressive expansion into new markets and service areas. 6 months after my sister had fired me in that boardroom, I found myself preparing for a meeting I never expected to have. My father had personally requested lunch, just the two of us, no lawyers or board members or business advisors, at his favorite upscale steakhouse. He was already seated when I arrived, and I was struck by how much older he looked. The stress of the company's near collapse, the family conflict, and the dramatic restructuring had taken a visible toll. His hair seemed grayer, his posture less confident, his expression more weary than I remembered from just 6 months earlier. You look well, he said as I sat down across from him. Success clearly suits you. You're carrying yourself differently, more confident, more self-assured. Thank you, I replied cautiously, uncertain where this conversation was heading or what emotional minefield I might be walking into. I owe you an apology, he continued, surprising me by going directly to the heart of the matter. Actually, I owe you several apologies for years of mistakes and misjudgments. But I'm not sure where to even begin. I waited silently, giving him space to elaborate without rushing or interrupting. This was his meeting, his requested conversation. He deserved the opportunity to say whatever he had come here to say. I should have recognized your talents years ago, he said, his voice carrying genuine regret. Should have made you CEO when I stepped down from active leadership. Should have structured the succession plan around capability rather than birth order and traditional expectations. I was blinded by conventional thinking. The oldest child inherits the crown regardless of whether they're actually qualified to wear it. My sister had her own strengths, I offered, feeling an unexpected and somewhat surprising urge to defend her despite everything that had happened. They just weren't necessarily the right ones for leading a logistics and operations company. She had social skills and relationship management abilities, he agreed. But those weren't sufficient for the challenges facing our industry and our company. You had the strategic vision, the operational expertise, the client relationships that actually generated revenue. And I was too stubborn and traditional to acknowledge that reality. He paused, looking directly at me with an expression of mixed emotions. You outmaneuvered all of us, created your own safety net right under our noses, documented everything properly, and we never even noticed what you were building. I'm honestly not sure whether to be angry at the deception or impressed by the strategic planning. Both reactions would be entirely appropriate, I said with a small, somewhat sad smile. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone, But I also wasn't advertising my contingency planning. I was protecting myself because I had always known, that eventually this conflict would come to a head. The board is considering another major restructuring, he said after a lengthy pause, his tone becoming more serious. They want to bring you back, not just your company as a contractor, but you personally as chief executive officer of the family business. I nearly choked on my water, completely unprepared for this revelation. What about my sister? She would transition to chief marketing officer, which actually aligns much better with her natural strengths and interests. She'd be responsible for brand development, public relations, industry positioning, areas where she genuinely excels. She would never accept that, I said immediately. That's effectively a demotion from CEO to a supporting role. That's public acknowledgement that she failed in the position. She's already agreed, he replied, surprising me again. Conditionally. What condition? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. That you two find a way to repair your relationship, he said quietly. Not necessarily become best friends or go back to being close sisters, but at least establish a functional working relationship. That's why I'm here. Not just as your father, but as the company founder who cares about the legacy. We need both of you working together, leveraging your different strengths, instead of competing and undermining each other. I sat back in my chair, trying to process this completely unexpected development. Return to the family company as CEO. Work alongside my sister after everything that had happened. Try to repair a relationship that seemed irreparably damaged. I honestly don't know if that's even possible at this point, I admitted. The gulf between us has grown so wide. The resentments run so deep. I'm not sure we can bridge that distance. Perhaps not, he acknowledged. But isn't it at least worth trying? Isn't it worth exploring whether you could build something even better together than you could build separately? I thought about his question long after our lunch ended, turning it over in my mind as I drove back to my office, as I reviewed contracts that afternoon, as I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. Could my sister and I find a way to work together? Could we move past the betrayals and resentments and competition? Could we leverage our different strengths toward building something genuinely extraordinary? I genuinely didn't know the answer. As I left our headquarters on a crisp autumn evening, 6 months after launching my own company, I paused to look up at the illuminated sign above our entrance. The journey from being fired to building a thriving independent business had been extraordinarily challenging. Grueling hours, constant stress, moments of genuine uncertainty about whether we would succeed. But it had also been immensely, deeply satisfying in ways I had never experienced while working for the family company. We now employed 35 talented professionals. We had secured multi-million-dollar contracts with industry-leading companies. We had even transformed our former employer, the family business that had fired me, into one of our most significant clients, a delicious irony that still made me smile when I thought about it. I had transformed betrayal and dismissal into spectacular professional success. Looking toward the future, I knew with certainty that I had many more chapters to write in my business story. There would be new challenges, new opportunities, new decisions about growth and direction, and potentially about reconciliation with my sister and return to the family company. But the sweetest chapter, the one I would always remember and treasure, would be how my sister's attempt to push me aside, to eliminate me as competition, had inadvertently given me the push I needed to build the empire I truly deserved. An empire built not on family name or inherited position or traditional expectations, but on competence, relationships, and the genuine value I had created through years of dedication and expertise. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Coffee tomorrow? Just us. No business, no lawyers. I think we need to really talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, considering all the possible implications and outcomes. Then, surprising myself, I typed a response. "Tomorrow at 10. Same place as last time. Perhaps my father was right. Perhaps it was at least worth trying to see if we could find a path forward together. Or perhaps I would wake up tomorrow and realize that some relationships, once broken, could never truly be repaired. Either way, I had proven something far more important than any family reconciliation. I had proven to myself that I could build something extraordinary on my own terms, without needing anyone's approval or validation beyond my own capabilities and the trust of clients who valued excellence over pedigree. And that knowledge, that unshakable confidence in my own abilities, was worth more than any executive title or family approval could ever be. The conference room of our expanded headquarters, we'd moved to an even larger facility to accommodate our growing team of 60 employees, buzzed with energy as I prepared for the morning strategy session. Outside the windows, the city skyline gleamed in the morning sun, a visual reminder of how far we'd come in just 1 year. My company had exceeded every projection, every ambitious goal I'd set during those desperate early days of building something from nothing. More surprisingly, my sister and I had slowly, painfully begun to rebuild some semblance of a working relationship. We weren't close, probably would never return to whatever sisterly bond we'd had as children, but we had achieved a functional respect. She had indeed transitioned to Chief Marketing Officer at the family company and, freed from the operational responsibilities she'd never been suited for, was actually thriving. The board's offer for me to return as CEO remained on the table, but I hadn't accepted. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Because what I had built here, this company, this team, this culture of excellence and accountability, was genuinely mine in a way that the family business could never be. My phone rang with an incoming call from a Fortune 500 company's procurement director. They'd heard about our work and wanted to discuss a potential partnership that would double our current revenue. I smiled as I answered the call, already mentally cataloging the resources we'd need to scale for such a significant opportunity. This was what success felt like. Not just financial achievement or professional recognition, but the deep satisfaction of building something meaningful on your own terms, despite every obstacle and setback. My sister had intended to end my career that day in the boardroom. Instead, she had accidentally launched it into something far greater than either of us could have imagined. And for that unintended gift, I would always be, in the strangest way, grateful.